Thank you for joining. So our agenda today for this presentation is going to be, we're going to do some introductions. We're going to talk AI basics, the importance of strategy, which some folks tend to gloss over, but actually it's the foundation for everything. We'll talk about how to assess AI readiness for your business, selecting the right AI technologies, and how to navigate the complexities of adoption in your organization. And then finally, we'll end with sort of how are we monitoring and enhancing the performance of AI in our business over time. And then we will conclude. So let's get on to introductions. I'm Andrea Mondello. I'm a principal and I cover at Withum. I cover data and AI. And my colleague here, Val, is with me. Val, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Very briefly, my name is Val. I'm the partner and market leader for digital workplace solutions, otherwise known as Withum Digital. And Andrea and I, we bring in a number of years worth of experience in what's now is called as traditional or more boring AI, as well as some of the recent focus on generative AI deployments with our business clients. And that's what we're excited to talk about today.
Thanks, Val. Great. So let's talk about some of those AI basics that Val was talking about. So AI refers to computer systems that can perform tasks that would normally require human intelligence. And when Val and I are talking to our clients, we like to divide AI into two buckets just to keep it simple. And that's the boring AI that Val was just talking about. And that means tasks that AI has been doing really well for years, and they're tried and true. Val and I have been using them for many, many years with clients. And exciting AI. And these are the tasks that AI still has trouble doing reliably, but it's getting better at every day. And the tasks that the kind of AI everybody's talking about now. So let's just start with the boring AI. So this, as I said, this kind of AI has been used for many years, and it works very predictably, although not 100% of the time. And you can make a good business case for its use because, the return on investment, or ROI, is usually quantifiable. It's easy to see the time saved because normally what you're doing here is automating repetitive manual tasks. And Val, do you want to cover when you want to, use this kind of AI?
Of course. The one thing to remember here is, again, like you mentioned, artificial intelligence as a discipline has been around for 40 plus years. So you would expect a lot of specific approaches, algorithms to have been tried and also working. One great example of that would be invoice reading, right? So extracting information that is very actionable from invoices, things like the grand totals, the individual line items. This would be a very good business-specific example of some of those older algorithms still being very much at use today. And you do want to bring those older tricks into your business still, even though there are newer, more fancier things that everybody is excited about, which we'll talk over on the next slide.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Val. That's great. So let's talk about this exciting AI, right? So this is the AI we've been talking about since ChatGPT's meteoric rise. It's known as generative AI. And it can create text, images, music, even video. And it's very good at creating new content, but it often has trouble telling the truth. So some uses of this type of AI would be like creating Word documents and PowerPoint presentations from an outline, or translation from one language to another, or a chatbot that can answer questions that you haven't told it ahead of time what the answers are, based on a body of knowledge. So this is really good. This stuff is really good at being creative. If that's what you need to do, if you have creative tasks, it's a really easy choice. Of course, it does need supervision. And Val, did you want to add anything here about Gen AI?
Specifically, I think, yes, exciting AI is what everybody talking about right now, and that's mostly an outcome of OpenAI having launched the ChatGPT service about a year ago, more than a year ago by now, creating a whole new category, both a new product and then also a whole new category of solutions. One of the key business uses of generative AI or ChatGPT or some of these other services that you may have heard about in the business context is brainstorming, which is helping you, excuse me, being more creative. So that's certainly a good use case for that.
Great. Thank you, Val. So, as we always say, as we always tell our clients, AI seems magic, but it's not magic. There's a lot of work to it. And there's a lot of preparation that you need to do as well, which we're going to talk about later in this presentation. Any input on this slide, Val? I know this is one of your favorite things to tell clients.
That is, yes, and I think the slide says it all. Folks right now have a lot of expectation. You probably remember your first visceral experience out of talking to ChatGPT. That it was like a kind of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm getting this out of the computer. But in practical business contexts, you do have to be looking at other elements of deploying AI, and that's what we're really going to be spending the time in the presentation. That said, again, remember, AI is not magic. It has a expected percentage of outputs that will not be right, and it's going to really require some careful consideration in how you deal with those specific edge cases.
Great, thank you. So part of that is developing, a vision and a strategy for how your business is going to use AI and how you're going to actually extract real business value out of this tool. So let's talk about that. Obviously, first, you want to align your initiatives with business goals. This ensures that your projects are delivering real value. And of course, like any new technology you bring into your business, you want to start with, what are the pain points we're trying to solve? Val, one of the things we're seeing as we talk to clients, and I know you've mentioned this as well, is folks sort of want to just get out there and try it. But those kind of projects, just getting out there and trying it, can be expensive. So we do want to think about pain points. Any feedback there you want to give?
On the pain point side, again, it's very important to select the right use cases, and those need to be the ones that are very straightforward and also very easy to implement. So that would be one of the key things that you want to try to select for. Don't start off with anything that is the moonshot kind of project, because what you're looking for is really just to demonstrate the value internally to your stakeholders, and you're looking to do that very quickly. Right. That's the point, I think.
Yeah. And you also want to clarify what is an acceptable versus an unacceptable risk for your organization. Mm-hmm. And that, that's going to depend on what kind of things you do. But as Val mentioned previously, AI is not magic, and it will not always get everything right. And the question is, in your line of business, if we don't get it right, what does that mean? So that's something, we're going to talk about a little further on, but you should start thinking about that now as we talk about your strategy. And Val, jump in at any point if you have feedback.
Of course.
So obviously having a documented vision and objectives will allow you to quantify the success of your project. Again, AI seems magic, but it is just one more technology that you're going to bring into your business. So business principles still apply. Okay. And you need to think early on about allocating budget and resources. So some of the roles that you need to be successful in an AI project may be a little different. You may hear people talking about data scientist, data engineer, all these kinds of things, and you may think, well, I don't have those kind of people. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes, because your first projects that you try, if you do it right, you probably don't need them. But eventually you want to think about, how are we going to build a team that can do this? So obviously you need to think about the hire or contract, investing in tools, but most important, training employees. So those are all things that are going to be determined by your strategy. What is our strategy? Is our strategy going to be, we're just going to hire the talent, let people, do it and outsource the whole thing, etc. So those are all things to think about up front. We talked about this risk management, and as Val always likes to tell us, AI is non-deterministic, right? So well, maybe you can explain it better, the difference between a traditional application and AI, Val.
Of course. So one thing to remember here is using some of these newer services is the first time around in business context where traditional users will experience outputs that are not fully predictable, right? And of course, you could say I'm using a computer program and it crashes on me. That's not predictable either. But the main point to make here is, by design, if you get unpredictable outputs out of your regular business software, it's a bug. It's something that can be specifically controlled for, fixed in a newer version, etc. By design, with any of the AI systems that applies to boring and newer generative AI, there's a slim margin of outputs that you're getting that is going to be not what you're expecting, right? So the non-predictable aspect of this is what makes it non-deterministic, because you really are dealing with a different types of system that operates on probabilities rather than just straightforward execution. And that's very important for you to understand right away, because again, almost any one of these you bring in is going to have a 5, 10, 20% margin of outputs that are potentially wrong. In the case of reading invoices, that was one of the examples I used. Again, you could have a 3% margin of getting the wrong total extracted, and that's where you have to be thinking about, okay, what do the rest of my processes look like, and am I exposing myself to too much risk out of having deployed a system like this to my business? The one thing to understand here is, though, again, even though these things are not predictable, not deterministic in their output, they're still kinds of automation systems, right? So this is really just another way of bringing in software into your business that does things better and hopefully, or faster and hopefully better. And that's where you're still able to use some of the older selection techniques for calculating the ROIs and bringing that software in. The one crucial difference, however, this time around, and I'm now converting away from deterministic systems, probably more towards the team selection that you covered on your prior slide, is that the playbook itself hasn't yet fully been written in terms of what makes for a good sets of use cases. So right now, it's a pretty open-ended kind of open book technology where you're free to explore your most optimal use cases that work really just for you in your business and not for anybody else. And that is also a very crucial difference to remember, because whereas before, as a typical mid-sized business, you could have expected to outsource some of this quote-unquote R&D and figuring things out to software vendors. Nowadays, we're not at that stage yet. We might be able to get there over the next couple of years, but we're not there yet. And your employees using services like ChatGPT, like Microsoft Copilot today, they're figuring things out for themselves, which is where it's very important to bring in the element of, again, promoting that usage and getting them trained up so that you can continue trying to figure out those use cases. And I think we'll be covering that a little bit later as we go.
Yeah, thanks, Val. And one more thing I wanted to mention on this slide, we'll again touch on it again, but there are also some data privacy concerns. One of the things that we, definitely our clients have found, the ones that have turned on, say, Microsoft Copilot. What Copilot in the business will do is look at your business content and then use that to generate answers, right? So you can ask questions about your business content, say things that are in SharePoint, say, and get an answer back. And one of the things, of course, that folks are finding is that maybe if the permissions weren't set up correctly on the front end, where the data and the documents are, folks are getting answers to things and seeing things they maybe shouldn't. So that also, we're going to cover that, but that's also something to think about as we think about, your risk management strategy. So again, just to sum, as you're thinking about bringing AI into your business for the first time, what project do you want to start with? So a good AI starter project is going to align with your strategy. It's going to be a first iteration or stepping stone of your ultimate objective. You may have a moonshot project, as Val said, in mind, but that's not where we want to start. But maybe this is a first step along the way to that. It's also going to encourage AI adoption among key influencers in your company. So, the folks who kind of influence everybody. Well, we want this, hopefully this project will touch them, so that then they spread the word. And as Val said, they start experimenting to find the good use case, the best use case that's going to get you the best return on investment. And of course, you want to have a project that's successful, that's going to prove the value of AI in your organization. So those are all the things to think about when choosing your first project. And I just want to give you an example. So we worked with a Fortune 100 food manufacturer, international manufacturer. And their strategic business plan includes streamlining vendor operations. So we are working with them on their AI strategy to include streamlining vendor operations using AI. And, the first project one of the first projects, there are several that, we're talking about, is a vendor onboarding chatbot experience. So why is this a good project? Lower risk if AI makes mistakes, since the onboarding always needs a human approval step anyway, and we're not disrupting an existing relationship. Their existing onboarding documents that we would be pulling from for the chatbot, that's very well defined, and there aren't a million of them. It's a very discrete set of content and very well maintained. It can be the first step in getting vendors used to a whole new way of working down the line. And it's easy to track and determine, how much does it cost to escalate to a human if the AI didn't work or if the AI makes errors. So this is an example of a good first project. That may not be a good first project for your organization if it's much smaller, but just to give you a sense of how we're judging where to start. So let's talk about AI readiness, because this really is the key. You're going to want to audit your existing data sources. You're going to want to, think about how much data, and when I say data, I'm also including documents here, Word docs, PDFs, things like that. How much you have, what are the different kinds? Are the things very different? And what is the rate of change? Is new data being added constantly? Because of course, then that means you're going to have to do some updating to get the most recent results, right? There's a lot more involved there. And then you want to assess the quality of the data, right? So are the things we have that we want AI to look at, are they complete? Are they accurate? Is it consistent formatting to make it easier? All of these are things we want to look at. And Val, do you want to talk to AI readiness a little bit as far as data? Because I know this is something we're finding we have to spend a lot of time on upfront with orgs.
Well, the one thing to highlight on this slide that's very important is quality of the data. So in this case, the mindset has to be quality over quantity, because like with almost anything else in your prior experience with deploying IT systems, it's garbage in when it comes to inputs, then you're getting garbage out. I cannot tell you how many times, again, we've spoken with folks who just hope that by deploying Copilot or something of that kind, onto their existing intranet or pointing it to a file share that contains 25 years worth of documents, that things are going to magically be found, right? Again, remember, AI is not magic in this case. If the more information you have, especially the more irrelevant information that the Copilot is operating on, you're just lessening the chances of finding that needle in the proverbial haystack if the haystack is so much bigger. So this is the step where you want to really be practical about selecting the kinds of things you would like to first roll out with your AI initiatives, and be very tactical about selection. So you have to have a good use case, such as, again, we're potentially trying to maybe create a chatbot or a knowledge system that answers questions on specific topics, and then select content just to support such a use case and not anything more. This will, in and of itself, if that's one thing you can do, just do that, and that will guarantee that you're going to be getting so much more relevant outputs, and your users are going to be talking about it in the positive rather than a quizzical and a negative.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so the bottom line there is, if you've been waiting for the last 5 years to start a content management project because your file share or your SharePoint is a mess, this is not going to magically solve that problem. AI is not magically going to solve that problem. So I think that's important. And again, this is a toll gate. So do you have sufficient high quality data and the processes to manage them for a successful AI project? Because you may say, well, we can spend some time getting our knowledge base cleaned up. But remember, you have to have processes in place to make sure that's an ongoing activity. So that definitely is a toll gate for this project. So now, of course, you may want to assess technical infrastructure. And the infrastructure needs are dependent on the type of project. Normally, for a starter project, you're going to be using someone else's infrastructure, someone else's AI model. It's not like you're paying somebody to come in and do this big statistical analysis and train your own model. And that's not normally how you start. So something like Microsoft Copilot Studio is a good example of ready-made infrastructure. So basically, this tool is something that you plug in your data, you point it at your data, you say, what model do you want to use? I want to use GPT-4o, or I want to use, whatever the model is you want to use. And then you can get started. So it's, again, this doesn't generally upfront, you don't have a big infrastructure investment. So you want to think about what can you do to use somebody else's technical infrastructure. And then you want to think about the skills. So most of the folks listening to this probably won't have data scientists, machine learning engineers, AI specialists on staff. Some of you may, but most of the folks probably won't. And when you're using these pre-built tools or somebody else's infrastructure, as I'm calling it, that will allow you to staff your project with folks you probably do have, like a data analyst or a business analyst, because those folks understand data, they have an understanding of data, they've been using data, and those are the folks you'll want to look at as your first folks to train, your first adopters here. That is probably a really good way to start. So don't panic when you hear all these other job descriptions. That's the great place to start.
Specifically when it comes to bringing in Gen AI tools, there's likely not a point at which in the near future you are going to require a data scientist or a machine learning engineer. If you're just a regular medium-sized business, you should concentrate on that same business, and that's where you first look at folks who touch data a lot. This would be, again, your data analysts, business analysts, folks in your accounting department that are interested in saving the time. And you try to get going by getting them familiar with the new tools, with the new way of thinking about the problems that they're trying to solve with some of these newer sets of technology items. And you just look internally first.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was a good call out, Val, about people in the accounting department, because obviously they're uh, used to working with data.
Mm.
Um, Now, you may be the leader in your organization, and that's why you're attending this business symposium, or you're one of the leaders, but there are other folks who you'd need to get their buy-in, and it is important that this comes from leadership. Um, but it is also important to make sure that you're focusing on how AI will make your business more productive and competitive, rather than doing AI for fear of missing out, that FOMO thing. Um, because we see a lot of that. Well, if I don't do it, my competitors are doing it, so I need an AI project. Yes, and we want to help you to do that, but let's make sure that we're doing it in a constructive way that's going to make your business, at the core, more competitive.
And that's the very crucial point here. Again, we don't recommend that you start off with the moonshot project right away, but having an idea of where you would like to invest your resources organizationally to become more competitive, to drive the one thing that makes your business unique.
Yeah.
That's eventually where you're building up towards. And you're starting with baby steps, with getting folks first trained and familiar and exposed to the great amount of the tooling that's out there, and you build up towards that.
Yeah. Thank you, Val. I kind of went past, but we're going to talk about selecting the right technologies. And um, so, again, I just want to cover these very briefly. We're not going to go into detail here, but when we talk about machine learning, a lot of this is that boring AI that we were talking about before, which means training a model to learn from data. And again, used for tasks such as classification, text extraction, anomaly detection, looking at a series of numbers and saying, wait, where are the outliers? Let's go look at those. And as Val has said, this has been around for a very long time. Many pre-trained models exist for the most common tasks. So think about invoices, expense reporting, document tagging, finding personally identifiable information, and much more. So this is kind of in the boring area, but again, these have been used for a long time, very tried and true.
The one thing that's important on that slide, Andrea,
Oh,
is, and
let me
yes,
go back.
feel free to navigate to it. But what I wanted to say here, the one thing that's important to realize again, lots of folks are very enamored with the new technology, but as business leaders, again, you have to be practical. And so chasing the shiny object, some amount of it needs to be part of your thinking. But one thing
Yes.
to remember is you're solving business problems that need to be solved in the most efficient and cheapest possible way, right? So most efficient way, and that's where some of the older technology still comes in. Yeah, certainly, there are demos out there of using ChatGPT to analyze income trends or expenses or things of that nature, and they all look very flashy. But eventually, for something that is repeatable, you're going to probably want to steer closer towards some of the true and tried algorithms. And quite frankly, if your problem can be solved with a linear regression approach, which has been around for decades, you should go ahead and plan on doing that.
Yep. Thank you, Val. Yep. Bring us back down to earth, right? One of the things that AI, is great at is speech recognition, and it's getting better and better. Converting spoken language into text, used for voice activated assistance, voice controlled application. This has been around for a long time. What Gen AI is doing is making it feel more human. And of course, this technology is really important if the eventual, use case that you want to do is something around customer service, right? Interacting with clients, then this is a great technology to think about. Okay?
One thing that is fairly new in this case, and again, this falls more under the bucket of exciting AI now.
That's okay. We can get excited too.
We just a little bit, right? The advances in speech recognition is what's actually going to drive a lot of secondary scenarios that used to be all very heavily based on data entry and make them much more efficient and, quite frankly, more enjoyable. So internally, we've used some of the same ASR, that's automated speech recognition technology, to help us with data entry on timesheets. You know, being in professional services, that's what we do every day. And just being able to describe what you did by voice is a much faster process than going someplace in an application, clicking on things and entering things on the keyboard. And I think this is one of the changes you're going to be seeing in the next few months, in the next couple of years, is more and more applications getting this additional mode of entry by voice, which is fairly exciting.
Yeah. You know, Val, that reminds me of, you know, we've been, you know, many of our clients use RPA, robotic process automation. And there are already tools. Now, normally when you're setting up that kind of a thing, and so what that means, as Val was saying, is if your employees have to go through this long series of steps to, first I log into this application, then I download, I get data, then I put that in a spreadsheet, then I go to another application, then I upload that spreadsheet, you know, this whole series of steps that they do. One of the ways in the past to solve that was with robotic process automation, which is a computer does all those steps, but it's a long process to program that whole thing in the beginning. And with the advances in speech technology, they're hooking all these, you know, kind of hooking the exciting AI up to the boring AI kind of thing. And now you can describe what you're doing as well as show it on the screen. And these new systems are doing a great job of kind of writing all that code for you. It's not 100%, but it gets you a long way. It saves a lot of time. So that's something we're very excited about because clients are still interested in RPA. So.
And those would be great, very practical examples of using speech recognition besides just client service.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, you know, there are these, when we talk about speech recognition, that leads me into recommendation systems. And I think all of us are familiar with this. So, you know, from social media, right? Like if I'm looking at Facebook or something and I'm looking at a video about dogs, then it may be that I get an advertisement for dog food or something like that. And these aren't, although there is a lot of complexity behind the scenes, there are ways to hook these things into your current systems. And an example of that is something called Azure Personalizer. That's Microsoft Azure. And it is a service for personalized recommendation that learns on what people on your, say, your website are doing, and then, you know, makes recommendations. So again, we're trying to be practical and say, use somebody else's infrastructure for these things. So this is very common. And you may think, well, my business is too small to do that. But in fact, you may be able to do it using someone else's infrastructure.
That makes sense.
And let's talk about chatbots because, you know, Val, you and I, this is what we're seeing everybody kind of start with. It feels like the starter project. But generative AI chatbots are different. So we've had traditional chatbots for a long time, right? I go to my bank and I open up the chat and it says, what would you like to do today? And I say, I like to open a new account, and then it'll give me 3 choices. Which one do you want to do? Blah, blah, blah. And you kind of go through this tree, a decision tree. But this is different because what's happening behind the scenes is not when the old way of doing it is I told the system, I gave it a bunch of questions and I gave it the answer to the question. And if the person asked a question that wasn't in that list, the chatbot didn't know what to do. And it would say something like, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. Would you like to talk to a live person, right? But this is more than these traditional chatbots because we're not programming all the questions in already. And these chatbots are reasoning over a business data source like we talked about before, a knowledge base or something, to find that answer. And then using one of these large language models, these Gen AI, like ChatGPT, to make it feel like a human conversation. So you can use your own knowledge base. You could plug, say, this into, say, Microsoft Teams, and your employees could ask questions about their, travel policy, right? What is the travel? How many cents a mile do I get when I use my own car, and all those kinds of things. So it speeds up development, because you don't have to know all the questions and answers in advance. And this is really a kind of a first project we're seeing a lot of. Anything here you want to add, Val?
Just for the additional context, I think the traditional chatbot model you were describing based on a set of menus, right? The trio of
Right.
menus. The one way of interacting with those systems that everyone's familiar with is the system you get over the phone, the IVR, interactive voice response, where you're literally just being driven through a series of choices, right? So the same technology applied for the web is what everyone's familiar with. And we're going right now again through the shift in delivering such services where you're no longer having to really drive that customer interaction by a set of rigid flows and choices. You're just able to give the customer the ability to ask a question. That question may not be necessarily about doing something, like is always the aspect of those chatbots today. It may just be about information finding, location. It's just a question on your knowledge base, as you mentioned. And that's, again, one of the new ways of thinking about problems. You have just been living it. You have been living to a certain number of key experts at your business before to answer things on email, and those experts, if you ask them, probably answer the same kind of questions most of the time. And there are, of course, the ones that are fairly unique, but that's another use case where you could be thinking about, can we collaborate with those experts, figure out what information sources they have. Obviously, they have a lot sitting just in their heads, but could you get it down in some electronic format and help them, help the rest of the organization be more efficient? You're going to be seeing a lot of this, again, change coming down across all sorts of different technology segments. You're seeing that right now with your Siri and Alexa just getting launched with a little bit smarter way of interacting with them, and that's basically enabled by the same fundamental technology, like the Gen AI, large language models.
Great. Thank you. That was great. That was a great addition. All right. So now let's talk about AI adoption, because this really is at the heart of everything. As business leaders, if you've ever launched a new technology into your business, that it could be the greatest technology in the world, but if you didn't approach it correctly and make sure your employees understood it, understood the reasoning behind it, and were excited about it to some extent, maybe it didn't take off the way you wanted. So, and the same is going to be true for this. So I'm just going to go over, I'm going to take a little bit of time to go over this. This is an AI roadmap, and we use these six steps, right? So first, you go through your ideation, which, is your brainstorming. You surface those pain points, as we talked about before. Then you prioritize them. Okay, but which is the most important, right? Which is the biggest pain? And then you choose out of that a proof of concept that meets the criteria that we talked about for a good starter project. So it may not be the biggest pain point you have, because maybe that is a moonshot, right? Maybe that's the solution is very complex, but it's one of those pain points, but we think we can tackle it, and we can use somebody else's infrastructure, and it will be simple enough and understandable enough, and we can show the return on investment. At that point, we've decided we know what we want to do. We decide what are the tools we need, like some of the ones we talked about. Then we go through the step of reviewing our data source, because of our data source, as we talked about, is it clean? If it isn't, if it isn't, you haven't weaned it down to the absolute essential, you're going to need to do that. Next, you're going to configure whatever tool it is, and then at the same time, you're doing any remediation to the data that you surfaced in step 2. then you're ready to start development, and only then. And then you'll start working with the tool and setting up whatever it is you need to do. You'll work on it. You'll evaluate the results. You'll say, okay, what percentage are we getting that's just, as we say, hallucination, or aren't the right answers? Why might that be? We continue on tweaking and do our validation. And when we've got it to the state that our desired level of it works right, then we move on to step 5, where we're deploying that now to production. We're training end users to use the system. And step 6 is that monitoring and measuring against our key performance indicators that we would have established in the beginning. Are we getting the results we thought we were going to get, both in terms of the system being working correctly, giving the correct answers, as well as people using it and not having, say, to escalate to human, like in the case of a chatbot, whatever the KPIs we determined are. So this is a comprehensive roadmap, and obviously you'll fill in a lot of details when you're doing it for yourself. But if you follow this, you'll really have a good path. Anything here you want to mention, Val, before I go on?
Just the point you made about having as a part of your plan to always measure the correctness of the outputs. That's very crucial. Again, your users will tell you whether you want this or not when your system doesn't perform, right? So you'll find out about that, but you'll be missing the ability, and you'll be flying this fully blind if you don't have a way to go back in and just start asking a set of predetermined questions where the answers are correct, and doing so at scale, right? So not just asking a couple, but asking 100 or a few, so that you can actually see how well your system is doing on the actual numbers.
Great. Now, let's talk a little bit about the human element. There are going to be concerns, let's be clear, about job displacement. There's a lot going on in the market that says, oh, AI is taking everyone's job, which isn't, for the most part, true. But when you bring AI into the workplace, you should plan for discussions around these concerns. Most of the time, that's not going to be the case. You're probably not going to eliminate jobs just because you brought in AI. However, jobs may change over time because you've brought in AI. Here, your adoption strategy is to find the scenarios where you can make people more productive. And that's what you want to say. This is going to make you more productive. It's going to save you time on repetitive tasks that are boring anyway, and leave you free to then do these other things, skill up in other areas, right? One of the things that studies find is that AI has the best effect. People get the most productivity gains the more junior they are. Subject matter experts get less gains, although they do. This does help them in their prep time, right? And remember, this is not about the quality. In the beginning, this is not about the quality of the result. It's about speed and efficiency. So I'm going to give you an example. This presentation, the way it was created was, I created a very simple outline. And then I asked Copilot to fill in the outline with sub-bullets. And then, I tweaked it a little bit. And then I told Copilot to create a presentation out of it. And so it created the presentation. Now, Val and I still had to go through and review and change some of the things. And of course, I added Copilot added some of the images, but I tweaked the images and added some other images, and but this absolutely, using AI absolutely saved me a lot of time in making this presentation. So even though I would consider myself a subject matter expert here, I still got a big productivity gain from using AI. And I know, Val, this is something you talk with all of us about, at Withum Digital.
There's lots of things to unpack on this slide, where I'd like to get back to a little bit on the point of concerns around job displacement. So again, one thing we've mentioned earlier is some of this AI-related conversation and the new tooling is just an instance of bringing in more automation into your workplace. And there's been decades worth of prior history of concerns around automation displacing jobs, right? So where it is important to remember right now, this year, the next year, is generative AI cannot replace the contents of a full job.
Right.
It can do certain tasks very well, but unless a job is aligned very closely to what you're able to get out of ChatGPT or one of those tools, you're not really going to be having that as a practical option for quite a while, right? At best today, using Gen AI is about getting you maybe up to 70% there, not 100%. And that is important for pretty much everyone to realize that it is not a current threat as things stand today. The one thing you mentioned on the greater benefits that accrue to the junior staff, that's primarily because you could think about this nowadays as just using a service like ChatGPT or Copilot internally in your business is akin to getting a better search engine at your fingertips. You can have access to the world's knowledge by just asking a question without having to go and click on links and read and try to extract that information yourself. So of course, having more efficient access to knowledge means for folks who haven't developed it yet, they will be seeing the most scientifically verified gains. For the subject matter experts, the SMEs, this is an inverse of a situation, because quite often the knowledge that they're able to extract, again, is the mean of what is out there in that given industry. And certainly those folks working at your business know more. And so the conversation in that case usually needs to be structured around efficiency of execution, like you mentioned, right? At the business, you're always balancing quality with efficiency of production. And in that case, any SME can certainly have a faster time to a first draft. And that's also a very important adoption-related keyword to mention to your folks, is most of the things you're bringing generative AI in at your business today is just helping you with drafting, not the final work product, for which the humans, those employees, are still responsible directly.
Great. We have to move on now to finish up the rest of our slides here, but I think we're doing okay. So when we're adopting AI, we develop a change management plan, right? We're communicating, we're deciding how are we going to have regular communication with our employees, highlighting the advantage of AI by using it yourself as a business leader. Let's be clear. And that's something I will say Val has been a great example for all of us, because every time we do something, he said, oh, but can you do this with AI, and here's how I could do this and save time. And it's been a fantastic motivator for all of us. You want to address employee concerns. You may want to just, kind of pull, if you have a small org, just pull a meeting together, or even if you're larger, conduct some workshops to address concerns and provide a platform for people to have feedback, Microsoft Teams, Slack, whatever it is that you use. And then, of course, provide training and support. So you absolutely want to organize some training sessions and upskill the staff on AI technologies. Now, we do want to think about privacy and security, as I talked about before. You want to make sure you're protecting your sensitive information. You're complying with any regulations that apply to, your industry. You want to make sure that, for instance, that data is encrypted at rest. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. We can talk about that. You can ask us about that later. But and establish data governance policies. And I would say that one is super important. Meaning, what is our policy? If this is our data source for our AI, who's allowed to access it? Who's allowed to update it? What is allowed to go in there? How often do we check to make sure it's up to date? Those are important policies to put in place if you're going to continue to use AI successfully. You want to regularly audit or scan for sensitive data. So if you have sensitive data in your organization for any reason, then that's something you want to be proactive about, making sure that that data, if it doesn't belong in your AI data source, that it doesn't get in there. You definitely want to be proactive about that. Now let's talk very quickly about shadow AI. You know, a large percentage of people are using AI at work. So you can see here, this is a quote I took from somebody that we follow named Ethan Mollick. His blog, oneusefulthing.org, is a great blog to read. But the point is, people are using AI, but most organizations haven't officially rolled it out. What does that mean? It means they have shadow AI. So in order to avoid this, you need to update your acceptable use policy, make sure your staff know what they should and should not use, be very clear, and provide acceptable enterprise tools based on the need. So when we talk about something like a ChatGPT, remember that's public. And when you put questions in there or you upload data there, that becomes public, right? So you want to make sure that your employees use the tool you've provided for them inside the organization, where hopefully the data is staying within the confines of your business, something like Copilot for Business, where that never goes outside to the public. This is very important because you may not realize it, but a lot of your folks are using ChatGPT and some of these others to answer your questions for your business, and that may be not what you want. You will want to address ethical and bias concerns. So this is not going to be applicable to everything, but there are some use cases, especially around hiring, reviewing resumes, things like that. You need to think about that. That is probably not the best project for you to start with, because there are some bias issues that even in these big models, they have been shown to have some bias. So you want to think about that before you embark upon something like that. And of course, let's talk monitoring. So, you want to continually assess the accuracy and effectiveness of these applications. Are the predictions, how do they match to the actual outcome? How many chatbot interactions escalate to human? Or if we're tagging, say, or extracting documents, is the accuracy declining? Maybe it's because we need to update our data set. Again, as we've said before, implementing AI in your business is not a one and done. It really is, you're committing to continuous improvement. So do you want to conclude us out here, Val?
I think key elements to remember from our presentation again, you need to remember that AI is not magic and is by design behaving unpredictably. Yeah. So it's giving you a margin of certain responses that is just not right, and you need to have a plan for dealing with that as a part of your deployment. Again, one thing that helps here is to think about bringing those tools into a process rather than a job or the whole broader business. And as you adopt a process-centric view, you're able to start using AI in certain tasks. You build in additional checks and validation of the output as you go. And if you're able to figure this out, then yes, you should proceed. Otherwise, you should stop and look for a different idea, look for a different process before spending $1 on many AI initiatives. You have to be selecting those initiatives quite carefully, but try to pick the ones that you can demonstrate early wins and successes on. Again, don't go initially for the moonshot. You have to think through how you're going to bring in those tools into your workplace. Again, now this is not a process-centric view, it's a people-centric view, right? How are those folks going to react to some of these newer tools coming in? How do you address their concerns? And of course, you have to have a system of measurement in place for tracking performance. And that is an ongoing kind of a process rather than just something that you execute as a quarterly initiative and move on to other things.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And let us know if you have any questions.